Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. If you're joining us from outside India. We are on session 9 of the ongoing AWS Security Masterclass. Session 9, we're going to cover AWS RDS misconfigurations, specifically around how RDS can be misconfigured at the network layer, as well as in terms of how snapshots can be distributed. And we'll do some OSINT as well to discover how people use, or rather, you know, provide RDS information through code and through context on the internet, and how information around RDS can be leaked. Right? We'll also talk about parameter groups. It's a key aspect of how RDS is configured, and we'll get to that. I'll explain that a bit more when we are talking about it. My name is Riaz Walekar. I'm the chief hacker and co-founder at Cloudl. Cloudl, as some of you are already familiar, is a cloud security SaaS product meant for engineers and infra teams to automate their detection of assets in the cloud, identify misconfigurations in them, and provide remediation guidance that can be automated and save time for those folks, so that they can go on and be productive within their organizations, right? Because security is not a primary function for most devs and infra folks, right? I've got over a decade and a half worth of experience in breaking web apps, mobile apps, and all sorts of internet connected devices. I more recently picked up container and Kubernetes environments as part of my offensive security skill set. And this AWS Security Masterclass is part of my knowledge sharing sessions as well. That's my Twitter handle. That's the company Twitter handle. Please do follow us for updates. All right, today's agenda. As I said, we're going to look at, there's no setup of the lab as required. I've already created the labs for you. We're going to work with some AWS CLI and the AWS console mostly. And that's the fastest way. We're not going to rummage through AWS CLI errors in this. The misconfigurations we're going to look at are public snapshots. We're going to do a bit of OSINT to discover RDS instances of other people on the internet. And we're going to look at some configuration with parameter groups. As I said, I'm going to talk about that a little more when we get to that. Parameter groups in RDS, right? And eventually, as usual, we're going to undo the AWS changes. Okay. AWS RDS, some of you are familiar with the service, essentially is a AWS service that is databases on the cloud, right? So if you've ever worked with any database, say MySQL, Maria, or Postgres, or Microsoft SQL, Amazon RDS service is essentially that, right? You have a managed MySQL instance on AWS. You don't have to worry about installation. You don't have to worry about what do you need eventually at the end of the day if you're a dev, right? You require access to the database to create tables, to query data within the tables, and to basically perform CRUD operations, right, on the table and the data within. So AWS takes care of the management of the server, the management of the software, the database software itself, while you are provided an endpoint where you can connect your web applications or anything else that you're working with, including your database clients, and interact directly with the database instance itself. And you don't have to rummage through any of the other setup that's required. Amazon RDS currently supports MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. Amazon RDS has a variant of the RDS called Aurora, which they'll try and, which you'll see in many places when you're working with RDS. And it's a paid service, right? And it's a little expensive for most parts. But Amazon Aurora is an RDS, but with far more scalability and, far more features than what Amazon RDS has. We're not going to look at Aurora today. We're going to focus on RDS itself, because all the things that we want to talk about misconfigurations, they apply to Aurora as well, and Aurora is a paid service, right? So we're not going to go there. All right, let's get ready for scenario 1. There is a slight, you'll have to install one more tool for this. You require a client because you're going to work with at least one database type. We've picked MySQL to work with this. So can you all folks go ahead and install the MySQL client? If you have it, skip this, but go ahead and run the command apt get install MySQL client. and confirm that the client is installed with -- version. I'm also going to do the same. I've already installed the client, so I'm going to skip the sudo apt get install part. Once you've installed it, do a thumbs up so that I know we can continue. Okay. apt get install MySQL client. I'm assuming all of you are using Ubuntu. Yeah, sorry, go on. You have a question?
No, I was looking for the thumbs up.
Oh, okay. You accidentally pressed the raise hand. No problem. No problem. Cool. Everybody else has got the client on? Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. If you've got the client, let's get started. The first scenario is actually quite simple, but it requires navigating through the AWS RDS console, and we'll do that. I'll do that on screen as well. Your task is to find a public RDS snapshot in the US East 1 region created by Acme Corporation for this masterclass. Right? And the question you have to answer is the snapshot encrypted? Right? We're going to answer the second question once the database is created from the snapshot. Let's go ahead and find the snapshot first. Right? So the information that you have is it's been created by Acme Corporation and the for this masterclass, and it's in US East 1 region. Okay, like EBS, remember when we did storage, AMIs in EBS specifically, you can create a snapshot out of a volume, right? Similarly, for a running DB instance, you can create a snapshot. Snapshot is the running, what you call, an image of the running database instance at that point in time. And because it's the complete database instance, a copy of that in memory and on disk, you can create a database out of the snapshot. Just like you can create a volume out of an EBS snapshot, you can create an RDS instance out of a RDS snapshot. So by definition, if you simply navigate to AWS RDS, so when I go to snapshots, go to RDS, you can search RDS here in the search text box here, search field here, and come to RDS and then come to snapshots. Right? You'll not see anything unless you've created your own manual snapshot here. Go to public, and like EBS snapshot, there are a lot of public snapshots, at hundreds, 264 to be precise in US East 1. Okay, these are all public snapshots created by a bunch of other folks. Because I created a snapshot yesterday, you'll find it in the list in the second, as a second or third option here, right? Else, if it was somewhere deeper, you would have simply typed something like Masterclass or Acme, since you know Acme. Okay. Because it's public, you can search for parts of the DB snapshot identifier, which is Masterclass Acme prod, right? And you'll be able to find the snapshot. Click on it. Now, to answer the question, what is the question? Is the snapshot encrypted? How do you answer that question? If you click on the snapshot, you'll be able to see a field called KMS key ID. You see that? If it's none, it means that it's not encrypted. Okay. Let's take a look at another snapshot belonging to somebody else. Okay, so if I go to public, just scroll down and pick any random one, assuming, oh, there are a bunch of them that are not encrypted. And I'll tell you why it is important to encrypt your snapshots, even if you're making them, you're going to make them public. Okay. Basically, if you have, I'm not going to click on all of them, quite a lot of them, but if you find a snapshot where the KMS ID points to an ARN of a KMS key, then the snapshot has been encrypted with that key, right? And it's important to encrypt your snapshots in RDS simply because if you're going to give it to another account, or if you're going to make it public, then the only way to restore it is you will require the key to be shared between the accounts as well, so that you can restore the snapshot right into an instance. So if somebody finds, as an attacker, if they find your snapshot, if it is if there's no encryption, they'll be able to restore it into a DB instance, which is what you're going to do now, right? That's part 2 of your question that has been asked. You want to, can you access the users table in the Acme prod database? To do this, you require to create an instance out of this. Okay, so how do you do that? So once you've clicked on the snapshot, go to actions and say restore snapshot. Click on actions and restore snapshot. Okay. I'll put up the default values you need to use on screen here. This snapshot is not encrypted. Here are the instructions. Restore snapshot. Keep all the defaults except for provide a DB name, and select instance configuration to be DBT3 micro. Under connectivity, select yes for public access. So provide a DB name. And this need not be unique across all AWS. Like you folks and me can have the same DB instance, and I'll show you why this doesn't matter, because the DNS compliant host name of the database is as a random string that is inserted, so that it is unique across AWS. In DB instance class, make sure you select burstable classes, and default is T3 micro. This is simply that so that you don't start like a huge server on this on AWS side. You don't want to get billed for an hour. Connectivity, public access, yes. Keep all the other things as the same, and then click on restore DB instance. Okay, let me know if you've started the restore, because restore will take a couple of minutes. I want to cover something else while the restore is happening for you folks. Just start the restore process and let me know. Sure. The others, just start restore for now, and I'll cover the OSINT bit and come back, because otherwise it's going to wait for the database to be created and take anywhere between 2 to 10 minutes. Couple of you've got this started, so let me go ahead and Cool. Right, so let's jump to doing the OSINT bit and come back to the database that's once it's created. Because remember this, right? It's a database at the end of the day. The database has users, right? Like all databases out there, there's a set of users that have access to the database. I'm not talking about IAM users here. I'm talking about the database level users, right? At the application layer. These users now, to be able to access the to be able to access the RDS DB instance, you require the username and password to access the database, right? Like imagine if you work with database, you have your root or SA and other users that you create as part of the database itself. Now you don't know the password of the user which is present inside the snapshot. You successfully created a database instance out of the snapshot, but you don't have access to the username or the password. The username is available, the password will not be available to you, right? Because password is stored in all databases is a hashed value. You can't reverse it, right? So what we will eventually do is, once the database has been created, we will have to modify the database after it has been created to reset the password, which basically means if you have any snapshot out there that is available to you, including anything else that's been posted under public that you saw, you can create an instance out of it, and it doesn't matter if you know the admin or the root password or not. You can reset the user's password by modifying the database after it has been created, and that is step 2 of the restoration process for us. Step 1 is what we're doing right now, it's being restored. Step 2 is we're going to modify it. So while we wait for the database to be created, let's quickly hop on to finding public RDS instance. I'll come back to those 2 slides after we've done this. All RDS host names are DNS compliant, right? And this is where you'll see the significance of why all of us can have the same host name, DB instance name, because the full host name for the database instance is your DB identifier followed by a string that is random, followed by region, and then .rds amazon aws.com. And by now you know, if there is something that is static in a host name, you would be able to discover it anywhere else, right? The piece that is static amongst all our instances is rds.amazonaws.com, and that's true for all AWS RDS instances on the internet, right? So we can simply search for rds.amazonaws.com on the internet using different services, Census, Shodan, Google, GitHub, and you'll be able to find these RDS, at least the host name, and somewhere around the host name you will have credentials also that people leak. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. Let's do a Google search for let's take a look at Pastebin, right? So if I do, there you go. The search queries are pasted here, so you folks can also try this together with me. I have some screenshots also that I've put up. So I go site pastebin.com. I'll only search Pastebin on AWS.com. Some search results. Do you see? I mean, I wouldn't advise trying these out. Don't connect to these databases unnecessarily. But to give you an idea of how you can discover RDS instances belonging to other users, you can read the Pastebin, but don't try the connect commands. Let's see. Take a look at this. Somewhere on this page is rds.amazon. So there is a database here, the username and password is provided. Okay, take a look at least one more example. And Pastebin is a place where people exchange snippets and they don't think it is traversed by Google. There's another one here. Wow, you'll be surprised at the number of results GitHub gave back. 3,000. Okay, you get the idea, right? So using GitHub as well and Bitbucket as another source, you can search for RDS instances that have been whose information is made public. What do you need to connect to an RDS instance? You need the host name, you need a username, and you need the password. And in case of AWS or any network-based setup for databases, you require the port on which the instance runs to be accessible over the internet, or at least to your IP address. 3306 in case of MySQL. Shodan as well as Census search. I've got couple of screenshots for you folks. This is Census. I have searched for RDS Amazon AWS.com and it gives me a bunch of Amazon boxes. And if you look at the port service name and further filter by removing any compute.amazon AWS, because this is an EC2. .compute and .compute1 are EC2 instances. You remove them from the filter, you should be able to end up with RDS boxes. We saw this as an example. Good. Let's go back to your database. Has it been restored? Yes, no. Just refresh the window to where it is. I think you don't have to refresh the entire page. There's a small refresh button here. You can just click on that and the status should become available. It's saying modifying. Okay, modifying is the last state, right? So basically the way AWS RDS takes this is your snapshot which is available, it creates an instance for you and then applies the configuration that you provided when you were choosing to restore, right? Including the box type, including the network configuration, by making it public. When you selected public yes, it does not mean the database is public, right? It means that it has been assigned a public IP address, but that IP address, depending on which security group it is in, that port needs to be open to the internet. 3306 has to still be open to the internet, and we'll find that once we have set up, once we have created the instance. Actually, if your status is in modifying state, go to the click on the DB identifier. If it's an already in modifying state, you can go to the instance and look at security groups, VPC security group, right? All of you find that. Once you have the security group, go to the security group, open it in a new tab. Easy to work that way. And look for the inbound rule on this security group. You want you to be able to connect to the instance that you've set up. So while the database is being set up, because the security group is not part of the database from a software point of view, it's run by AWS. You can add your IP address or the public internet. Don't recommend the public internet, but for this example, create a new rule, add rule, custom TCP, port number 3306, anywhere, or you can choose your own IP and save. I've already added it, so it will complain that I have the same rule. So do custom DCP 3306 anywhere and save. This will allow your RDS instance to become accessible to your address. Otherwise, simply because it has a public IP does not mean it's public. The security group needs to be open for the port on which the service is running. Okay, is status available now? Anyone else? Yeah. A minute more. Remember, I told you all last week that for EC2 and other things, it takes about 20 seconds to get an EC2 up and running. But RDS will take some time. Okay, while the status is still modifying, because you still have to do one more modification to access the database. Let's take a look at some other key aspects of what the RDS has under go to configuration. Do you all see the master username? Should be admin for all of you because that's the user within the DB. Okay. This is metadata that is stored about the snapshot with AWS. Otherwise, AWS has no way to figure out what is the username from within the snapshot. Because if they're able to do that, that means they have access to your data also, right? This is stored outside the database. After we've done this, we're going to, this is the parameter group thing I was talking about. Pretty interesting profile of configurations. Cool. Has the status changed? Only one of you should have got the DB now. Very good. Nice. So as soon as it becomes available, the folks whose status is still saying modifying, please take a look. Go to modify, select the DB and click on modify, and provide a name. Provide a password for the user, because you don't know the password that I had created. Imagine you found the snapshot in the wild, and now you want to gain access to the data within the instance. You provide a password. You can auto generate one, or you can specify your own. Nothing else changes except on the next page when you do continue, there is an option to when do you want to apply the modifications. Click on apply immediately. Otherwise, because the database has to be done properly in production, you require a maintenance window. But we are hacking, we are not like setting up database for. So apply immediately. This will take about a minute and a half. Select the DB, click on modify, provide a password. Nothing else changes. Click on continue and apply immediately. Okay. I have several times I've done the mistake of clicking next without reading. Apply immediately has allowed me to access the DB immediately. Otherwise, we wait till I don't know what time this is. 12 o'clock. Apply immediately should this database. This one is a quick one. So as soon as that's done, you should be able to connect to the database using MySQL command. Leave that here. MySQL -u admin -p and h and the host, the full host name. Where do you get the host name from? Here. You click on the database. The endpoint is mentioned here under connectivity. And just because MySQL runs on 3306 does not mean that it will always be, you need to know the port, right? By default, the client will connect on 3306, but sometimes when you're restoring, you had the option of changing the port as well. Security through obscurity. Some folks may move the port to a different 666, anything, because the way AWS RDS manages this is they've got like this really huge EC2 instance that we don't have access to, which is why it's managed. And there are instances of MySQL running on this, right? So the host name allows users to access the service directly, because what do you need, as I said, right? You need host name, you need name and the password, and access to port 3306, which you have enabled through this. Once you're able to connect to the instance, you will be inside SQL database, and then you can browse around. I'll put up the command to connect to the database. I'm assuming all of you are now modifying the user password of the there. Connect to the so if the port is open and you can access 3306 for that host, you will have the prompt for enter password. If you don't see enter password, it means the service is not reachable, which means your port is, the two things that would have gone wrong. You didn't select public to be yes when restoring, or the security group does not have port open to your IP address. One of these two things could be wrong. Verify that. I will connect to the instance. Great. Here. Are you folks able to log in into your instance? Can you go ahead and complete, the folks who can log in? Can you access the users table in the Acme prod DB? How do you do that? These are MySQL commands, not specific to AWS. You do show databases. You have Acme prod. You have to use Acme prod or in infer using a dot to Acme prod dot users. But it's easier to simply navigate to that database. So tables, users, you can do a select star users, or if you think the output is going to be too big and there are too many columns, you can do a describe users to see what columns it has. It has ID, username, password, def name. There are only 5. So you can do a select star users. You can do a limit 10 if you think that it's going to have hundreds and millions of I usually, if I've gained access to MySQL instance or any database instance, I always use limit. A good practice to use limit. So you folks are now able to access the database and you now have access to the data also again. This is, I mean, just make sure that you know the commands to, list tables and do a select star, most basic command on users table. Hint, we will likely use this in the CTF next week. Make sure that you are the command in the slides. Cool. So this is a demo. I'm going to, you don't have to set up anything. I'll show you in RDS parameter groups are essentially configuration profiles for a given database software type. So if you look at, like all databases, there's going to be a bunch of configuration that we've not done, right? But if you have ever set up a database instance on your own, there's a ton of configuration that is either default available in the mysql.cnf file, for example, or you would add to when building or compiling the software. Now all of this is taken care by AWS, but where do we see those configuration options? So if I look at configuration, and you can do this on your side as well, you will see that there is a DB instance parameter group. Again, options group and DB instance parameter. Open that. Now, AWS has a lot of defaults created for a lot of different types of combinations of database software, right? Like if I'll show that in a branch. Let me show that first. Oops. If I say create a new parameter store, new parameter, I have only one right now because that's the database I have run. This was created by default. Now look at the parameter group family. So you have a lot of variations based on the version number, based on the database software type. If I choose something else, like if I choose SQL Server, I choose SQL Server EE, which is Enterprise Edition. I call it something. Create. While looking at this is the one that is currently applied to our database. What this means is there are about 27 different pages of configuration items that AWS configured for you. Okay? To make readability easier, I'm going to remove some items from here. Course. Right. All of these are configuration parameters for MySQL that is applied to this instance. Like something like report. Okay. Possible allowed values are whatever 16551 to 65535. Let's take base dir, the database where it is physically stored on the file system. It is stored in this folder called RDS bin/MySQL. And again, remember why it's important to realize that you will not have access to the compute instance that is running, which is hosting this MySQL, because you are not, it is a managed service and you don't have access to the EC2 instance that is running DB. So all of these parameters, including they require SSL, for example, require secure transport, okay, or SSL primary key, right? SSL certificates. A lot of these configurations, which are defaults in when you're deploying this manually on a compute instance you have created. Bunch of these are modifiable because you have access to the EC2 instance. Now imagine, and that's the example that I have in the slides as well. There are parameters, there are configuration options that use file system objects, like where the database is going to be stored, where the log is going to be stored. All of these require you to access the file system. But because you don't have access to the file system, AWS RDS doesn't let you modify these. And if you see, they're all false. Okay? Now, interestingly, that's where the search that we had done comes. All modifiable parameters are marked as true. You can change this to modify the configuration of the DB. Apply the group again. Again, the RDS will go modifying. Interestingly, and very obviously so, no parameter that uses a file system path is modifiable because it's a managed service. The example is in the next slide. What we had identified was that the AWS RDS service by default does not enable TLS for endpoints, and this is published. I've given the blog link in the references. But basically, we identified that if you disable SSL in your client, you would still be able to access the instance. And as evidence of that, our current DB that we've not changed anything in, I can access the DB if I provide SSL, if I disable SSL code, set to disabled, right? It prompts the password. Basically means the connection TCP handshake was established. The TCP connection established, I can access. This means that the connection between this client and the RDS instance now is unencrypted. Any data, any current operations that you perform here is going to be visible on the wire with Wireshark or any other tool like that. And someone can even modify this, right? We actually did some extensive study on what kinds of databases based on the different configuration options that are there within the AWS RDS. We identified a list of all possible AWS RDS options, configuration options, and we were able to see that for SQL, for MySQL, for Maria, for Aurora, a bunch of them, some of them were not even modifiable. Link is in chat. So for these types of RDS engines, the setting that enables a secure connection, the default value is either empty or 0, and in some cases it's not even modifiable. So for MariaDB and MySQL, for example, this is 2022 data. I haven't updated this based on today, but this is what we discovered, and AWS said that of our customers still rely on this. They fixed it, but you get the idea. And I'll show you one more interesting thing with instance. You remember when I said that the username that you tried to connect, that you used to connect to your RDS instance was admin. Okay? However, if I go to select describe let's do user and couldn't see file prev, definitely file super prev execute prev, select user com. These are privileges that are assigned to various users. No typo. So if you see this, admin is our user, the one that we have used now. If you notice that admin has no file privs, has execute privs, and it has no super privs. Do you see that the user called RDS admin? Okay. We at no point in time found that there is a user called RDS admin. This user RDS admin, the credentials for this user are with AWS because they have this user has full privileges on the file system. You can load and write files as well. Folks who have done pen testing with injection back in MySQL, right, would have found you can write to a file, right? To a select into write out file, okay? Or even you can do a select load file. For example, if I do select load file and to read the which should be possible on MySQL instance if the secure file prev folder is empty. But in this case, I can't read the file. I can't even read the files which are present in the current directory because this user, the user that I'm right now logged in as admin, does not have the file prev option. If they had file prev options, I would be able to read files that are present on the file system, which does not make it a managed service anymore. The idea of managed service is that it is transparent. The functionalities, the underlying operation of the database is transparent to the user. That's the primary function of why it's called a managed service. All right, so go ahead and make sure that you delete the RDS instance that was created. If you want to keep it around for some time and play with it, the instance type that we've created is T3 micro. You won't be charged for it unless it's under it's not under free tier. So make sure that you delete it after you've done experimenting with it. When you're deleting the RDS instance, you will be asked if you want to create one final snapshot. Make sure that you uncheck that text box, the checkbox, so that you don't end up creating a snapshot at the end of the deletion process. Any new security groups you may have created as part of creation of the instance, RDS instance, make sure that you delete that as well. Couple of resources as references. The first one being the SSL TLS AWS issue with RDS that we just discussed. Take a look at the approach that we did for the research part of how we discovered the issue. The second link is the how to mitigate the instance and the issue with the TLS. And the third and fourth links are AWS documentation from restoring from AWS snapshots, RDS snapshots, and working with parameter groups. Feedback link is already shared with you folks. Make sure that you fill this up. It's required as part of the ongoing masterclass. Gives me an idea of your interest levels and whether the class is being is it useful or not for you folks, if it's proceeding according to the plans that we had. And also allow me to figure out if we can do more masterclasses. I plan on doing a Google Cloud masterclass sometime in the next couple of months. So this will give us an idea. That's all for today. I will see you all next week. Here's a link for signing up on AppCloud. We have a free trial going on. If you don't want to onboard your cloud account, you can run a sandbox and see what the product looks like. The Academy link is also here. This is where we write and publish all our technical content /blog and /academy. That's our Twitter and my email address if you want to reach out to me for any questions, anything cloud security related or the product related questions if you have. Cool. Thank you so much folks for attending the session today. I will see you all next week. Have a safe weekend.